and number 8 is Paddington in Peru. Number 5, most anticipated for next year, is Saw 11. My number 4 most anticipated film for next year is Ballerina. But my number 1 most anticipated film for next year, and that is Mickey 17. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going over my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2025. And as you saw from that little intro there, I didn't have a lot of success in predict my top 10 anticipated of 2024 of actually getting them to come out. 4 out of 10 not coming out isn't great. So hopefully we've got a little bit better luck here in 2025. Before we get into the top 10 list, I do want to give just a couple things I want to talk about. The first thing being that there isn't going to be any real honorable mentions because as soon as I upload this video, I'm going to upload my list on Letterboxd, and the list, I think I got up to 117 films that I'm anticipating in 2025. Now, obviously, that's just a list of pretty much any movie that I've heard of that I have some interest in. Obviously, a good chunk of them aren't even going to come out, and then there's a good chunk of them I'm probably not, and just going to end up not seeing because they just kind of disappear, or I just lose interest or something. But as of right now, those are the 117. I think that's what I ended up at I'm anticipating. So again, as soon as this video goes up, I'm gonna put that list live on Letterboxd. I'm gonna put a link to that my Letterboxd is always in the description, but the link to that specific list is gonna be in the description as well of this video. And then also, while I say I'm not gonna really do any honorable mentions, there are a couple films that I'm going to talk about here that before we get into the list that I just want to give a mention to. They're not going to be on the list, and they're not going to be, actually I think a couple of them are in the list anyway of my on Letterboxd, but they're movies that haven't come out yet here in at least in America, that maybe have come out otherwise. Either they've been released internationally or they've been released at film festivals, or they have theatrical runs right now in New York and LA and stuff like that. And pretty much those films aren't going to be here because they're 2024 releases, even though I haven't had the chance to see them yet. So things like The Brutalist, Nickel Boys, and Sing Sing are the 3 biggest for me that I'm going to put in there that I haven't been able to see them yet. They haven't quite gotten to me yet. There's also one more film that I'm going to give the biggest of shout outs to, and this is for all the wonderful people of Brazil. I'm Still Here has not been released yet in America. It is going to be released in the next, I want to say it's around Valentine's Day. I think it's early next month. That is probably my most anticipated of the year. But again, it's not going to be on this list because it is a 2024 release, since obviously it has been released other places, or around the world. And I didn't want to include those films just because then my top 10 list would just be all the remaining Oscar films that I haven't seen yet. Those are my most anticipated. I'm Still Here, Sing Sing, The Brutalist, Nickel Boys. I'm sure there's other, Last Show Girl. I think that just came out. It's in theaters now, so hopefully in the next day or two I'm going to go see that. But those films would take up the entirety of this list, so that's why none of those films are included, but I am excited to see them. And then the last thing that I just want to talk about is with this list, again, there are the four films from last year that got delayed to this year, those being Mickey 17, Ballerina, Saw 11, and Paddington in Peru. Those films, I put them into my top I tried to work them into the top 10. Paddington in Peru and Ballerina, they actually didn't crack my top 10. For this list, I just have kind of lost a little bit of interest in them. And there's just this year 2025 is going to be a great year, I think, for film. So there's just a lot of other things that I was more interested in. So those two actually didn't make my top 10. Saw 11 and Mickey 17 both stayed in my top 10 most anticipated. But I want to give you 10 new films. So technically this is a top 12 because I'm going to talk about briefly when Saw 11 and Mickey 17 come up on the list. I'm going to talk about them. But I'm going to pretty much give you 12 films because I want to give you 10 new films that I haven't mentioned or haven't talked about before on the channel. So without further ado, let's jump into what is, I guess, the top 12 most anticipated of 2025. Coming in at number 12 is The Running Man, directed by Edgar Wright, starring Glenn Powell, Katie O'Brien, and Josh Brolin. Now, the reason that this made a spot in my top 12 is because I love Edgar Wright. He's one of those directors that I've seen a lot of his films. I haven't seen the whole filmography. He's a great candidate for my director's ranked videos that I've been doing on this channel. Um, I haven't seen his whole filmography, but of his films that I have seen, I've loved pretty much all of them. I have a good buddy who was really big into Edgar Wright, and he's one of the ones that, that really introduced me to Edgar Wright, I would say. And so it's just because of that love that we both, him especially, I think, I don't know if he still is, but he was at that time his favorite director. And so that's where I've kind of got that love, and so I just love everything that Edgar Wright does. The reason Running Man is all the way down at number 12 on this list and didn't technically crack into the top 10 is mainly because I don't know what The Running Man is. I know it's a remake of an older film that I know like very little about. I don't know a whole ton about the plot. I guess I did hear one of the casting things of who's playing like a game show host, so there are like little details here and there that I kind of know about it, but for the most part I don't really know anything about the Running Man. I'm sure that once we come around to, I should have written down what the release dates on these films, at least the ones that do have firm release dates, because I want to say this is like later in the year. So I'm sure by then, by the time this comes out, I maybe will have watched the original, or maybe have done a little bit more research on what The Running Man is. But this solely has a spot in here solely just because of Edgar Wright, because of how much I love him as a director and how much faith I have in him making a good film here. Coming in at number 11, Wicked for Good, directed by John M. Chu, starring Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, and Jonathan Bailey. Now, a couple weeks ago, when I first started making this list, I made like a top 10 just out of, just the films I knew for sure that were coming out this year. And when I first made that first top 10, Wicked for Good was pretty high up in the list. It was, around 7 or so, because who wouldn't be anticipating the part 2 of just an amazing, moment that Wicked was. And then obviously I did a little bit more research. Some films kind of started knocking it down a little bit, and so it just kind of ultimately fell out of the top 10. The reason it fell out of the top 10 for me is because while the first Wicked, was good, I enjoyed it. I didn't get to the point where I was like so passionate about it the way that a lot of people have been, and obviously a lot of that being people that are big fans of the stage adaptation. Obviously some people that aren't really familiar with the stage adaptation were also very big fans of it, and so it's one of those that for me personally, I just feel like my excitement for it doesn't match the hype that a lot of other people have. I fully expect Wicked for Good to be like a lot of people's 1, 2, 3 most anticipated of the year. For me, while I am interested and I am excited to get to, because I only know a little bit about what kind of happens in the second part. I don't know too much. I'm not too familiar with the Broadway musical, so I'm not so versed into it that I'm just like so excited, no matter what, like I've got to see this. So for me, it's in there. I'm anticipating it. It's just didn't have quite enough to crack my top 10. And coming in at number 10, Companion, directed by Drew Hancock, starring Sophie Thatcher, Jack Quaid, and Lucas Gage. Now, this is the one that it kind of came down to Wicked for Good or Companion, and I thought, which one is like more representative of me, I would say. And I think I went with Companion. I went with kind of the smaller, as far as I can tell, kind of thriller, horror, suspense, mystery thing that's just seems like a wholly original idea that there isn't a whole ton of that you can gauge based off of the first trailer. I know there has been a second trailer, I think that's come out recently. I have avoided it so far, and I'm going to continue to avoid it because I want to know as little as possible about what this film is, because the one trailer that has played over a lot of the movies has done enough to capture me, and I know that it's going to be crazy, and I know that Jack Quaid is going to be insane, and Sophie Thatcher, who was obviously great in Heretic. She's been in, I want to say I haven't seen Yellow Jackets. I've heard she's great in that. She's been in I'm drawing a blank on there's a couple other films I've seen her in that she's played these smaller characters, but she has been an up and coming actress that has captivated me, and I think she's playing some sort of doll/robot thing in Companion. Again, I know almost nothing about this other than the creepy first trailer that has come out for this, but I know it's going to be crazy. I know it's going to be, just insane. and everything about it just screams that this is going to be a fun, and those are some of my favorite movie going experiences when I go and see a Barbarian, or from this year The Substance, or Strange Darling, different movies from that you go in and you walk in, you don't know a whole ton, and then you walk out and you're just like, what the hell was that? And that's what I feel like Companion has the ability to be that, and so that's why for me, I'm pushing it over a little bit more. I'm more excited for that because of the endless possibilities of what this film could end up being. Coming in at number 9, Materialists, directed by Celine Song, starring Dakota Johnson, Chris Evans, and Pedro Pascal. Now, Materialists gets a spot here, and I think I kind of have a rule where if you direct my favorite movie of the year, any given year, your next film is like automatically has to be one of my most anticipated, especially when it's like this. If it's like how Past Lives a couple years ago was my favorite film of the year, and then you're going from one kind of intimate piece of film to another original piece of film that you're making that isn't, it's one thing to just say, like, if you're just directing, if you're, Denis Villeneuve and you're just directing all the Dunes, like, obviously I'm going to be excited for each one moving forward. But when it's like your own original stories, those are the things that I think kind of pique my interest a little bit more and get me more excited. I will say I'm a little nervous for Materialists for a couple reasons. One, I'm not sure it's coming out this year. There's a whole lot of, and I guess this is a good time to mention on that list on Letterboxd, I have them sorted by release date, but then once you get to the bottom, I can't remember what the official last movie that is on there that has a release date, but it's like the last 20, 30 films or so don't have release dates, and they're kind of just all, they're in there. I think I put them alphabetically, but they're just kind of in there, and so I don't know. I can't confidently say that this it's going to be released, Materialists. I also don't know exactly what the vibe, because there's so little information about this movie. I don't know what the entire vibe of it's going to be. There is a lot being said about Chris Evans, has been on a pretty cold streak, so I'm hoping that Materialist is going to be the film that Chris Evans kind of comes back to, remembering that he can be a really good actor. And I know a lot of people are kind of, I think it's kind of the Madam Web of it all for Dakota Johnson, where a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of her. But just go and watch like Am I Okay or Cha Cha Real Smooth. Like, Dakota Johnson has a great filmography. She has so many other films that have proven to me that she can be a great actress, especially like a great kind of indie actress. And so that's what I'm hoping that Materialist is I hope it's kind of this low budget romantic drama that I think just brings the best out of all of these actors. And if so, I think we have the potential for just another amazing outing from Celine Song. Coming in at number 8, Blue Moon, directed by Richard Linklater, starring Ethan Hawke, Margaret Qualley, and Andrew Scott. Now, Blue Moon is a movie that, if you would have asked me 4 months ago, 5 months ago, A, I didn't know what it was. I guess I still don't really know what it was, but I would have had no idea what it was. And B, once you told me what it was, I wouldn't have been excited because I wouldn't have cared. I haven't seen a lot of Richard Linklater movies, and I just wouldn't have been interested. But now, with last year having gone through my Directors Ranked series, going through Richard Linklater, going through his whole filmography, I'm so bought in on Richard Linklater as a director. And I'm especially bought in on the chemistry that Richard Linklater has with an Ethan Hawke. And you look and you see Margaret Qualley, you see Andrew Scott, you see some other kind of these young upcoming like very great actors that are just gonna crush it in a Richard Linklater film. And so I think this is one of those films that there's very little that I know about the plot, and by very little I mean not a thing. And I know almost next to nothing about the cast outside of these three, but it's one of those that just after, in 2024, going through that experience of watching all of Richard Linklater's filmography, and especially because Hitman, this most recent film that came out last year, was just such a smash hit, was such a big thing, that I loved so much that it's going to be, in my top 10 of the year. So it's one of those that, because I had such high expectations for the director based off of just the experience of being able to watch his entire filmography and loving his most recent outing so much, you put that together with this cast, and that's all it took for me to really just be all the way committed on Blue Moon. Coming in at number 7, Saw 11, directed by Kevin Grudert, starring Tobin Bell and Costas Mandylor. So here's where we have the first repeat from last year. I'm going to be brief on this one because I talked about it a little bit last year, why I'm so excited for the Saw franchise. It's one of those that the first couple Saws are so amazing and I love them so much. Then the series kind of takes a big dip and it's just kind of this downward trajectory where it's just kind of you're getting rinse and repeat the same film over and over. And then Saw 10 comes out a couple years ago, and I'm not going to say it was some amazing film that just like reshaped the entire franchise, but it definitely brought life back to the franchise. And so I think when you're able to do that in Saw 10, I have to give Saw 11 a chance, and I have to hope that it does have the success that I'm hoping it does and kind of continues to revitalize this franchise. I will say that there are some rumors and there's some stuff because it got delayed from September of 24 to September of 25. I've already heard there's some kind of rumors that a lot of people don't know if this is happening. They don't know if it's actually going to come out or if it's going to get delayed again. Which will suck if it gets delayed twice. And I'm already saying it now. I'm gonna put in a rule: if Saw 11 gets delayed again, it's not going to be in my most anticipated of 2026. You get two strikes here, and then you're out. But I also will say that if Saw 11 doesn't happen to come out, then we're just going to slide everything up and put Marty Supreme in at number 12. I think that's it's worth shouting out that that was the film that just got left off this list. But again, not going to say too much about Saw 11. There are more thoughts in last year's video, so I just want to kind of leave this video for this upcoming year's films. Coming in at number 6, Superman, directed by James Gunn, starring David Corenswet, Rachel Brosnahan, and Nicholas Hoult. Now, growing up, when I was a kid, my family, especially like my cousins, they were very big DC comics. Like that's what they were. They were massive into that. And so by kind of association, growing up, that was a lot of my stuff was kind of Superman, Batman toys. We had my cousin's family and my family as well. They like playing D&D, and so we had like these little kind of DC superhero D&D kind of tabletop type games that we would play. And so for me growing up, those were the superheroes that that I knew. And then Spider-Man was like the one Marvel guy that I knew. And so it's kind of crazy to think from when I was a kid that those were kind of the superheroes I knew, and then kind of going into a little bit more of the Spider-Man era, that becoming my superhero, and then Marvel just kind of with the MCU just kind of taking in and that becoming like the prize of like superhero films and content. I kind of felt like I maybe abandoned Batman and Superman, like I just kind of didn't care about DC a whole ton. And during the whole the last phase of the DCEU, there were a couple films here and there that were pretty good. But unfortunately for me, it wasn't the Superman films, and it wasn't really the Batman films. Those weren't the things that really got me excited about the DCEU. And crazy enough, in the DCEU, the type of the films that were getting me excited was like the Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn. And I love the Guardians trilogy as well. So I know a lot of people are kind of already turning on James Gunn before we've even really got to see what his DC universe is going to be. But I'm excited for James Gunn coming over, and I'm excited to kind of have a rejuvenation of the Superman property that a young me was very into, and has just since not really cared about Superman, about the DC comic universe. Just I've kind of lost a little bit of that interest in that enjoyment that I maybe had when I was a little kid in that. And so I'm excited for Superman. The first kind of teaser, the first trailer that's come out, I don't know exactly how I feel about it. I'm hoping that it's going to be great. I don't know if it's going to be, but regardless of wherever it lies, it's still, I can't deny how much I am anticipating that film. Coming in at number 5, Avatar: Fire and Ash, directed by James Cameron, starring Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, and Sigourney Weaver. And Avatar is such an interesting series for me because not only did I not really like the first Avatar, I didn't even see the first Avatar for years. Like, I think I saw it. I'm trying to think of what was it. 2021? Is that when Avatar: Way of Water came out? I think it was 21. So I think it was 2020 was the first time I ever even watched the original Avatar, and I really didn't like it. I was just kind of bored, and I just wasn't engaged. I wasn't interested. It was just kind of, I was like, this is fun, fine. It's just not for me. And then I watched it again before seeing Avatar: The Way of Water, and I still didn't love it a whole ton. I definitely respected it a lot more, and I was kind of more, into it, and I was like, okay, there's something here. And then I went and saw Avatar: The Way of Water, and it just kind of blew me away. I ended up seeing it multiple times in theaters. I saw it in a couple different formats, different screenings, and I was each one I was kind of blown away when I was seeing it in IMAX, seeing it in standard. I ended up, it was on an complete accident too, but I ended up seeing The Way of Water in 3D once. So I guess I saw it 3 times in theaters. But I was just kind of blown away by The Way of Water. It was something that would just, it captured me. It was one of my favorite. I think it was. I don't think it was quite top 10 favorite film of that year, but it was pushing it. Like, it was right there. It was right on the outside. And so just to have a franchise where to go from one where I just wasn't really interested to a second one where now I'm just bought in and I'm all in on the franchise, to where I'm so excited to be able to go to the theaters and see each new edition. That's something that is really exciting to me, to find a franchise. And there's another franchise we're going to talk about in a couple more from now that's kind of the same thing, where a new film being able to just capture my interest and really hook me in and bring me in. That's all I can really ask for in terms of a film going experience, a movie going experience. And that's truly the definition of like what makes you anticipate a movie, is something that you used to think that you were kind of fine without, and now all of a sudden it's just like it's what you think about, and you're like, I need to see this movie, I need to see it as soon as possible. So that's why I'm anticipating Avatar: Fire and Ash. Coming in at number 4, The Fantastic Four: First Steps, directed by Matt Shakman, starring Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, and Joseph Quinn. Now, I talk about Spider-Man kind of being my first, my real superhero from when I was a kid, especially in terms of in the Marvel universe. I will say that I love the first two Fantastic Fours. I loved those films. I watched those a lot as a kid, and those were kind of like, that really was kind of it. I didn't see like Daredevil or Elektra or Blade, the movies that were in that era. Ghost Rider. Like, I wasn't seeing any of those movies. It was like the Spider-Mans and Fantastic Four. Those were the comic book movies that I really kind of saw in that era of when I was a kid, kind of becoming a teen. And so I'm just super excited for the Fantastic Four. Is just a property that I've really enjoyed, and it's one of those that, looking back and hearing a lot of people that didn't think that those first films were that good, and I go back, I watched them. I think it was last year. Was it 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago, maybe, that I was watching the Fantastic Four movies, and you're watching them, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's not as amazing as I thought, but as a kid, those were like superhero movies. Was the Fantastic Four, like, those were the superheroes, so it was so exciting to see, I just, for me to be able to see these characters again, and not in a four stick kind of situation, to be able to really see Marvel coming in, integrating them into the MCU. The MCU has been kind of hit and miss, but I thought that Deadpool and Wolverine was a great film from last year. I guess I shouldn't say great. It was a good film from last year, and that did enough for me to kind of continue my excitement for the MCU. There's been years past where my top 10 would have been like 3 Marvel movies would have cracked into the top 10, and maybe a DC, so it would have been like 4 out of the 10 would have been comic books. This year, only 2 films are superhero movies that crack the top 10. And but it's one of those that it's the interest for the MCU is kind of, for me, it's been hinging on the last couple movies. Of There's certain films, things like Captain America, and even though I think Thunderbolts looks good, I'm not like hinging a lot of my faith on the Thunderbolts to save the MCU. Fantastic Four: First Steps absolutely is one of those films that I'm kind of putting my faith in, and this has to be good. Like, this has to be good for the sake of just young me being a big fan of this franchise, but it also just has to be good for current me having any sort of faith and anticipation and excitement for the MCU moving forward. Coming in at number 3, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, directed by Christopher McQuarrie, starring Tom Cruise, Simon Pegg, and Haley Atwell. Now, this is the other franchise that I was talking about. A franchise that I used to have no interest in. The Mission Impossible franchise. I had not seen any of the Mission Impossibles, to the point that, because I used to be this type of way where I didn't like to go see a new movie in theaters if it was like part of a franchise, if I hadn't seen the previous installments in the franchise, and I was too lazy to go back and watch previous installments. And so it was before Dead Reckoning. Yes, Dead Reckoning Part 1. It's not really Part 1 anymore, but it was before Dead Reckoning was when I finally sat down and said, okay, I'm going to watch the Mission Impossibles. Like, I'm hearing so much hype and I'm hearing so much buzz, and this trailer looks amazing. It was kind of fresh after the Top Gun Maverick, and so I was kind of becoming a fan of Tom Cruise, someone that I just had never really seen a whole lot of Tom Cruise films before. And so going into that and being able to watch all of those, going on to that journey, and just falling in love with Dead Reckoning when I saw it in theaters made me to the point that it's kind of the same as Avatar. These franchises that I used to not care about, you give them a chance, and all of a sudden you fall in love. And again, that's just what like cinema is for me, being able to experience something, experience a film, experience a franchise that you had overlooked. Now it's like, again, it's you're thinking about every time I see that trailer, I'm getting so hyped. I hear the music playing, and I just can't wait to finally being able to see potentially the final reckoning, the final chapter here of the Mission Impossible franchise. I don't know if it will be, because part of me thinks that Tom Cruise is, he's that kind of guy that'll want to keep doing this, or even if he doesn't, at least they'll kind of spin it off and let someone else kind of take over the franchise. So I don't think this is necessarily the end for Mission Impossible, but if it is, I'm anticipating it even more so than I would be otherwise. Coming in at number 2, Wake Up Dead Man, A Knives Out Mystery, directed by Ryan Johnson, starring Daniel Craig, Josh O'Connor, and Kaylee Spaney. And the Knives Out films are a series of films that, no matter, like, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say no matter how good they are. If this one isn't good, then any future installments, I don't know if there will be, but if there are any future installments, maybe I won't anticipate them too much. But the first two have been so good that it's just one of those that every time a new Knives Out film comes out, any new film in the franchise, it's going to be like a top 2, top 3 most anticipated film for me of that year. I am so bought in. I know a lot of people were kind of a little bit critical, or a little bit let down, I would say, by Glass Onion. But for me, it was just the only thing I was let down by was not being able to see it in theaters, watching it at home. I know it had like a week theatrical run before it went on Netflix, but I don't think it had a theatrical run near me. At least it wasn't in any theaters that I was going to at the time. So that's the one thing for me with this, is I know I would enjoy these a whole lot more. The way that I enjoyed Knives Out, seeing it in theaters multiple times with different groups of friends, and because it's just a whodunit murder mystery. It's just, those are the type of films that you love to go see with friends, go see with a big crowd, hear the gasps, hear the oohs and the ahs, and then afterwards you get to talk, and you get to discuss and say, oh, did you catch it? Did you notice these clues? Were you following along? Like, that's the type of a whodunit murder mystery, is just kind of one of the staples of like a fun film, a fun genre. Growing up, my mom is a big Agatha Christie fan, and so growing up, I watched those older versions of Murder on the Orient Express, and just the different adaptations, before Kenneth Branagh obviously kind of been redoing them now recently. But I grew up on watching a lot of those kind of murder mysteries, especially the British murder mysteries with my mom. And so murder mysteries, it's just a genre, it's just a staple in terms of films that I enjoy. And so as long as they're good, which the Knives Out trilogy, or series, has been for me so far, I expect the third part in a potential trilogy. I don't know if there's going to be more than this, but I expect this to continue to be just as good as the original. The one thing is, I really hope I'm going to, if it does have any sort of theatrical run, which with Netflix I don't know if I can expect, but if it has any sort of theatrical run, I am so excited and so anticipatory of this film that I'm going to go see it in theaters. And again, I'm just super excited for what this franchise is and has become, and is just continuing to put out each every couple years. And then coming in at number 1, it's still Mickey 17, directed by Bong Joon-ho, starring Robert Pattinson, Naomi Ackie, and Steven Yeun. And this is one of those films, like I said, Saw 11 kind of had like a 2-strike policy. Mickey 17 is going to have like a 10-strike policy. You can keep delaying this film all you want. Whenever it comes out, it is going to be my most anticipated movie of that year. I'm begging, please let it be this year. I can't do another delay on this. But it's one of those that ever since Parasite, I have been itching for the next Bong Joon-ho film, getting kind of a little bit of teases of information, getting that still image of Robert Pattinson upside down, like in the spaceship, seeing that image being circulated when that was like all we had about this film for like over a year. I was still so excited and just anticipating this film. And then with each continual kind of release of information, eventually once we get to the more of the cast being announced, now we've got a trailer, now you've got, I think there's a couple, maybe a second trailer, we've gotten really close to the release date, it's been pushed back, it's been moved forward, pushed back again. Like, if throughout it all, you can't shake my excitement for how excited I am for Mickey 17. Again, I talked about it last year, so I'm not going to say too much more about Mickey 17. All I know is we're hopefully within the next 4 or 5 months. I think is when it's currently. And that's what's so crazy. I can't even remember where it's currently slated. Where it's currently slated, because I want to say it was supposed to be in like January initially. Now I think it moved to like April or May, and now I think it's into early March or something like that. But regardless, wherever Mickey 17 currently is on the release schedule, it is my most anticipated movie of 2025. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below in the comments what your most anticipated films of 2025 are, or let me know what your thoughts are on these kind of 12, 13-ish movies that I kind of named and talked about. Just let me know if you're excited for any of these along with me. Also, let me know if you go through my list and you see any films that I don't have in there that I should be anticipating for 2025. I did a couple hours of research of finding films to put into that list, but I'm sure there's still plenty of films that I just missed or just didn't know that were coming out. Also, every single year there's so many films that are like the best films of the year that we just didn't even know about a year prior. So I'm sure there's going to be great things, great films that I don't have in that list that are just going to blow me away in 2025. And again, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to like the video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Have a great day.